Hi there. Thank you for being with us today. You may have seen a poll pop up on your screen. If you've had a chance to answer that, I hope so. Let's take a look. So this is sort of what we expected. It sounds like most of you are familiar with the BOT, but not the movement ABC-3. So you're in the right place. Today, we're going to be talking about the BOT-3 and the movement ABC, doing some comparing and contrasting. So without further ado, let's move on to some intros and get started. So again, thank you for joining us today for our webinar comparing and contrasting the BOT-3 and the movement ABC-3 assessments. Today is a super special day because our cross-continental OT team here at Pearson has contributed to this presentation. The slides were developed by Melinda Cooper, an occupational therapist and the product manager for the OT line here at Pearson. Melinda's located in Australia, so she isn't able to be here with us live today. Shelley Hughes, another OT and the portfolio director for healthcare and therapeutics at Pearson, is located in the UK, and we'll be talking about the movement ABC-3 in a bit. And I'm Elizabeth Munsell. I'm an OT and a PhD in rehabilitation science, and I'm the research director here at Pearson for the occupational therapy portfolio. I'm located in Chicago in the States, and I've had the good fortune of being part of the development team for the BOT-3, so I'll talk about that after a brief introduction. But last but not least, we've got Selena Oliver, who's not an OT, but she's very knowledgeable about both of these tests. Selena's a school psychologist and the senior clinical assessment consultant at Pearson. So we've got a lot of people attending this session, which is super awesome, and she's going to be joining us to help answer some of your questions in the chat. Shelley and I are going to go ahead and turn off our videos now for the remainder of the presentation, and then we'll jump back on to chat with some Q&A at the end.
Oh, Elizabeth, I think you've muted at the same time.
Yep. First, let's take a quick look at the agenda for this webinar. After a brief introduction, we'll have a short overview of the BOT-3 and the movement ABC separately first. Then we'll take a side-by-side look at the similarities and differences in both tests. And then we'll spend some time talking about a few different clinical scenarios and how these tests might assist in practice before we have time for questions at the end. So let's start by talking about why we're here. Why did we think it was a good idea to discuss these two assessments together? Well, this is awesome. This is an awesome year for us because we find ourselves in a really unique position. We've got two brand new revisions of two of our most popular tests releasing within about 6 months of one another. We are super excited for both of them, and so we want to talk about them naturally a lot. The movement ABC was published right at the end of 2023, and we have BOT-3 coming early in the summer. Both of them are motor assessments, and both of them are revisions of previous tests. So in some ways, they're very similar, but in a lot of ways, they're actually quite different. And the aim of this webinar is to help you get to know a bit more about each of the new versions and understand what each can offer in your clinical practice so that you can make a really informed decision about how these tests will work for you when you think about updating your assessment OT toolkit. So our goal for you is to understand how the unique attributes of each test can be useful in different clinical situations. And we'll discuss this more when we present the case studies during the second half of the presentation. Okay, so let's start with the BOT-3, which is getting ready to release as we speak, and will be available early next month. We're super excited about it here at Pearson. Just like the previous version of the BOT-3 is authored by Brett and Bob Brunix. The BOT-3 is an individually administered test. It is used as engaging and goal-directed activities to comprehensively measure fine and gross motor skills in children and young adults. It's most often used by practitioners such as occupational therapists, physical therapists, sometimes adaptive PE teachers, but just note that it's available to any B-level professional who's seeking a valid, reliable, and comprehensive measure of motor skills. As many of you know, because we saw lots of you are familiar with the BOT-3 or with the BOT, it consists of 8 subtests, which I've listed here. The first 4 subtests are the fine motor subtests, which create 2 fine motor area domain scores and a fine motor composite score. And then the last 4 subtests are the gross motor subtests, which form 2 gross motor domain scores and a gross motor composite. And just like the BOT-3, this BOT-2, this will be really familiar to you. The total motor composite is the overall summary score for the test. So again, for those of you familiar with the BOT-2, you'll see that the 8 subtest names are essentially the same as the BOT-2, but the one exception is dynamic movement, which is the new name for running speed and agility. The BOT-3 can be used in many different contexts and settings. What we've seen is the primary applications of the BOT-3 include supporting diagnoses of motor impairments, making placement and support decisions, developing and evaluating motor interventions, and assisting in research. And it sounds like many of you have experience in those areas. But now let's get onto the good stuff and take a look at some of the changes that have been made in this new edition. All right, the BOT-3 retains 47 items from the BOT-2 and includes 16 new items that are spread across 7 of the 8 subtests. Some of the items that were dropped include the copying a star task from fine motor integration and also the wall sit from strength. And I know some of you might be pleased to hear that of those changes. So hopefully that'll be good news for you. The running course for the shuttle task has also been shortened from 50 feet to 30 feet. So it'll make it easier for you to find space to administer it. Some of the new items include a supine flexion task that complements the prone extension task that was already in the BOT-2, a crossing midline activity and bilateral coordination, and then some new pencil and paper tasks in manual dexterity that require finger movements similar to those needed for handwriting. So we're super excited about those additions. The number of items in 7 of the 8 subtests has increased, which strengthens the scope of the content in each subtest, and it also provides more psychometrically robust scores. Just note that the only subtest that remains unchanged from the BOT-2 is fine motor precision. Another big change that BOT-2 users will notice is the removal of the second trial, yay! So now examinees will only perform 1 trial per item. We did some analysis early on in our test development process and found that the provision of 2 trials really didn't substantially alter test outcomes. So we removed the second trial, and this freed up some time and some space in the test to make room for new items without adding to the overall administration time. What this does mean, though, is that examiners will now need to be even more diligent about teaching the tasks well before they begin the formal assessment trial. And that brings me to the next change. So, excuse me, in addition to the suggested teaching script and the pictures that are included in the admin easel that you're all familiar with from the BOT-2, we also now have new demonstration videos that you can use to show the examinee to help them understand the task. These are especially useful in situations where, for example, an examiner may not be able to physically demonstrate the task themselves, or when an examinee learns better from visual demonstration rather than a verbal description. The demo videos are an optional extra for really any time you need them as part of teaching the task to the examinee. The scoring guidelines for fine motor integration items have now been updated to be more detailed, provide more specific rules and examples, and that helps reduce subjectivity in scoring and overall just gives you more certainty that you're scoring the item correctly. And then also the way the push-ups are scored has been simplified. So in the BOT-3, you assign different item points on the record form for knee versus full push-ups, which means you no longer have to use these separate norm tables for the different push-up types. And then speaking of norm tables, we have far fewer norm tables in the back of the manual, as the BOT-3 only provides combined norms rather than separate male and female norms. Again, this decision was made after careful analysis of the data. And so this should make navigating the tables and scoring the test significantly easier for when you have to, significantly easy for you. And then also when you have to carry your kit around from place to place, this is really good news because the manual is now thinner and lighter because we got rid of so many tables. Something else that'll make the whole kit lighter and easier to carry around is the fact that the BOT-3 does not include a balance beam. So the balance items are now all performed on the floor, which makes them safer for individuals who have a lot of difficulty with their balance. Note that we do, however, have some additional advanced balance items that you can use if you want to obtain an extended balance score. And if you do want to administer these optional items, you'll need a balance beam. But if you have one from the BOT-2 that's in good condition, you can still use that, or else you can buy the beam separately. And we offer a combo kit option that includes the balance beam on our website. Another new feature with BOT-3 is the expanded options using Q Global, which is, if you're not familiar, that's Pearson's online assessment platform. With the BOT-2, we had ability to enter scores from the paper record form onto Q Global and then generate a score report with the click of a button. And we will still have this option with BOT-3 along with traditional scoring, but now you also have the option to use on-screen assessment through Q Global. We're super excited about this development. When you're using on-screen assessment, you don't need the administration easel because all the instructions that the examiner uses are built into the platform, including those demonstration videos that I mentioned earlier. You also don't need to use a paper record form because you enter the data directly into Q Global. So once you're done administering the test, you can generate a score report just like you would with manual entry on Q Global. As you're sort of thinking through how this might work, you might be wondering about the examinee-facing pictures that are in that traditional admin easel if all the other admin easel content is now shown on screen. And so if you do choose that on-screen administration version of the BOT-3, there is an item picture book that you can use to show the examinees the photos of what they need to do. And it kind of just looks like a thinner version of the easel with just the examinee pictures included. Something to note is that the digital record forms are obviously included in the BOT-3 digital kit, but even if you buy the print kit, you can purchase digital record forms in any quantity to supplement your print kit. Okay, so while some of the manipulatives in the BOT-3 are the same as the BOT-2, for example, the pegboard, the sorting cards, and threading beads haven't changed. We have revised the shuttle block, the token pad, and tokens, which were called pennies for the BOT-2. And we also reduced the overall size of the target so it fits neatly in the kit bag without bending. All of these modifications were designed to make the items more durable, easier to clean, and more universally applicable in different geographies because the BOT-3 is used in so many different countries around the world. As many of you are aware, sometimes frustratingly aware, the BOT-2 used an atypical norming scale, and this caused some issues for some of you, especially people who are teaching the BOT in university courses. So you'll be pleased to hear that the BOT-3 norm scales have been aligned with other commonly used pediatric tests by applying a traditional score with a mean of 10 and a range of 1 through 19, and a standard score with a mean of 100 and a range of 40 through 160. The last change that I'm going to highlight is that we've expanded the age range from on BOT-3 so that the norms now span starting again at age 4, but all the way up to age 25 years and 11 months. Okay, so now as exciting as all those changes I just talked about before are, the real game changers and the features that many of us in the BOT-3 development team, including myself, are the most excited about are the new scores that we've added to the test. We have 3 new supplemental scores, plus we've also introduced growth scale values, which you may have seen in other tests, for instance, like the Bailey-4, but they're new for the BOT. The first supplemental score I want to highlight is skilled manual performance. The skilled manual performance score specifically describes fine and visual motor skills by combining fine motor precision, fine motor integration, and manual dexterity subtests to provide a pure measure of fine motor abilities. So we know that a lot of OTs only administer these 3 subtests, so this new score will allow you to calculate a fine motor composite and get a standard score that does not include the upper limb coordination subtests. And we hope you find that really useful in your practice. The next supplemental score is planning and coordination. The planning and coordination score is derived from items from 7 of the different subtests that we specifically selected because they relate to issues with planning and motor coordination. This score can help identify clinical populations with challenges related to praxis or motor planning, and that includes individuals with developmental coordination disorder and autism. It also allows for better documentation of these specific motor domains. Again, we hope you find this useful. We're really excited about adding this new score. The last supplemental score, called the Movement Fundamental Score, is made up of some of the easiest items on the BOT-3 in order to measure an examinee's level of proficiency in these basic motor skills, which are often described in the literature as fundamental motor skills. These skills can be considered the building blocks for more complex movements required to participate in play, sports, and many recreational activities. Fundamental movement skills typically mature around age 10 to 12. So the purpose of the Movement Fundamental Score is to help track the development of these skills. Because we're looking at tracking the development of skills over time till they reach like maturity or proficiency, this score is criterion referenced rather than norm referenced. And so it uses descriptive categories of emerging, developing, or proficient. We can think of this score as being specifically like useful for younger examinees or examinees with more pronounced motor challenges. The last type of score I want to talk about are the growth scale values, or GSVs. So GSVs are provided for all 8 subtests on the BOT-3, as well as the extended balance score. And they also allow you to measure progress against the examinee's own previous performance rather than against a normative sample. So think of these as a more psychometrically sound alternative to reporting increases in an examinee's total point score on a subtest. I know often we have to do that in order to show that our examinee is making progress, but now we can use GSVs because they're really useful for examinees who are likely to continue to score in the below average category when compared to their peers on norm reference scores, but do show incremental gains in skills over time that you want to capture and report. So that was a high-level overview of the major changes in the BOT-3 compared to the previous edition. Just a little teaser here. If you'd like more detail, we do have another webinar coming up near the end of the month with author Brett Brunix and myself, so keep an eye out for that one. But now let's turn our attention to Shelley as she provides an overview of the movement ABC.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so the movement ABC, or the Movement Assessment Battery for Children, or the MABC-3, you'll hear it called any of those titles. It's authored by Dr. Sheila Henderson and Dr. Anna Barnett, who are both based in the UK. They're both international experts on motor development and motor development challenges. They've been researching and working in this field for quite a long time. It is, as I said, published in the UK, which is why it's not so well known in the United States, but it might surprise you to hear that it is actually, whereas the BOT is more widely used in the United States, worldwide, the movement ABC is actually more widely used. It's translated into lots of different languages, and it's very well used throughout the world. It also might surprise you to hear that the first edition, I know we're now on the 3rd edition, but the first edition was actually developed and normed in the United States as well. And the 3rd edition that we're now talking about, as we've already mentioned, was published at the very end of 2023. So as Elizabeth said, we're really excited. It's a big year for motor assessments and some of the work that we've been doing in this field. So the assessment is a brief measure of fine and gross motor competence. It includes a complete kit, which includes both a performance-based test and a checklist component. And that checklist component helps incorporate some top-down elements and caregiver or self-report views that you don't necessarily get from a performance-based assessment. And I'll talk more about that as we go through these slides. And the content of both tests and the checklist is arranged into 3 domains, those domains being manual dexterity, aiming and catching, and balance and locomotion. There's also a section focused on non-motor factors such as impulsivity or anxiety. And it's looking at those non-motor factors because we know that those factors may influence or affect motor performance. And we know there's a high correlation between motor challenges and other neurodevelopmental conditions. And in terms of those domains, the manual dexterity domain includes fine motor tasks such as drawing around paths, placing coins in a box or pegs in a pegboard, lacing a thread through a board, and threading beads onto a string. For the checklist items, it might include tasks such as fastening buttons, turning pegs in a book. So they're more practical items relate to everyday tasks. For aiming and catching, that involves either tasks such as catching a beanbag or a ball, throwing at a target, and there's also one task that requires both aiming and catching, such as bouncing and catching a ball. And in terms of the checklist items, it might include things such as reaching for objects without knocking them over or participating in ball games. And balance and locomotion includes activities such as walking along a line, balancing on a narrow beam, and hopping and jumping. And in terms of checklist items, it might include tasks such as keeping balanced whilst dressing, putting socks on, for instance, or riding a bike. So it kind of gives you a brief overview of the test. In terms of uses, the main uses of the movement ABC, quite similar to the BOT-3. It's often used as part of a comprehensive developmental or motor assessment to assist in identification and diagnosis of movement-related disorders or abilities, such as conditions such as developmental coordination disorder. It's used to assist with intervention planning and to monitor progress, whether that's with or without intervention. And it's been highly used in research. I know even a few years ago, there were over 500 papers where it had been used in research. And so that obviously has gone up significantly. I wouldn't be surprised if we're closer to 1,000 papers now in terms of research. So it's very widely used in research. So from our poll at the beginning, we know there's a group of you who are familiar with the movement ABC-3. There's a group that are perhaps not. So I'm going to talk about what's changed, but also this will be a good sort of overview for those who aren't familiar with the test as well. So I'll talk a little bit about the previous version, but more focusing on the current third edition. So the movement ABC-2 test, the previous version contained a total of 8 tasks for each of those 3 age bands. There were 3 manual dexterity tasks, 2 aiming and catching, and 3 balance. For the movement ABC-3, 1 additional task has been added to the manual dexterity, domain, and 1 to the aiming and catching, giving a total of 10 items for the whole test. The exception to this is that 3-year-olds only complete 7 out of the 10 tasks. And as with the BOT-3, the age range has been extended up to 25 years, 11 months. It used to be 16 years of age. So now we have a total age range of 3 to 25 for the movement ABC. That age range is divided into 3 age bands, which have been slightly modified from the movement ABC-2. So age band 1 is from 3 to 6 years, 11 months. Age band 2 from 7 to 11 years, 11 months. And age band 3 starts at 12 and goes up to 25 years, 11 months. And although the tasks are different at each age range, there was really a conscious effort in the movement ABC-3 to provide more continuity in the tasks from one age band to the next. So, for example, in the previous version, there was age band 1 was the only age band which included a bead threading task. Now, in the new version, each age band has a bead threading task, but importantly, the beads become smaller as age increases, making the task more sensitive to developmental and age-related abilities. Similarly, each age band completes a task called drawing circles. And the drawing circles task requires the examinees to draw around circular paths as quickly and as accurately as possible. The size of the circles actually decreases as the age bands increase. So the older you are, the smaller the circles that you're required to trace around. And then there's also much greater alignment between the constructs measured within the checklist and the test. The previous version, the checklist only covered a narrow age range. I think it went from, if I recall correctly, from 5 to 12 years of age. Now, with the third edition, the checklist covers the entire age range of the test. And as I said, there's greater alignment between the constructs measured between the checklist and the test, making the 2 instruments much more easily comparable. So previously, the checklist I think previously contained, I can't remember, I think it was 30 items if I'm remembering correctly. It now contains 40 items organized into 3 domains. So those are those 3 domains that I mentioned previously, manual dexterity, aiming and catching, and balance and coordination. And it looks at motor competence in everyday life situations, as some of the examples I've given you, such as dressing, eating, playground activities, recess time. And there's also a section that looks at the impact of motor difficulties on the examinee's life. And this is really key to what we're trying to do as clinicians. We're really trying to understand the impact of this on somebody's participation on their everyday life. So it really gives us that valuable top-down approach. And as with the BOT-3, some of the movement ABC-3 manipulatives have been retained from the previous edition, but others have been redesigned. So there is a new balance beam. Previously, the balance beam was in 2 pieces that you clip together. Now it's a single balance beam with a hinge. Another important aspect of the test is transportability. We know that this test, a lot of therapists are quite peripatetic. They work between different schools, different clinics, different homes, and transportability was a really important part of the test. So there's no need to set up the room with taping the floor. We have a line for line walking that you roll out that can be used to sort of that's measured to the correct distance for the child to do the walking along the line task. We also have floor mats, which are needed for some of the gross motor tasks. And with the previous edition, they were quite heavy. With the new edition, they are much lighter material. And importantly, they're machine washable, making them both easier to transport and clean. And they can be rolled up. And there was a lot of research went into developing these to ensure that they were non-slip and that they were durable and they stood up to all those tests of being cleanable as well. There's also a new larger ball for younger children, and we've retained the tennis ball for older individuals. And like the BOT-3, the Movement ABC offers digital options. They're brand new for this edition. We've never had any digital components before. So the checklist can be completed with a paper form or digitally via on-screen or remote administration, which makes it great for telehealth or for busy, time-poor clinicians. It can be emailed out to a caregiver to complete, maybe perhaps prior to an assessment session or during an assessment session. So it really does lend itself to being very versatile. And the test also has the option of a paper record form, so you can do paper or digital. And with the paper form, you can still use digital alongside it by entering the raw data straight into Q Global via the manual entry delivery mode. And as with all of our Q Global products, it will then score and generate reports on both the test and the checklist at the touch of a button. And just like with the BOT-3, the Movement ABC-3 also has demonstration videos available, and they provide examiners with another option for showing the examinee what they need to do. With the BOT-3, with the Movement ABC-3 and with the BOT-3, it's important to be able to demonstrate the items, and we have different ways of being able to do that to ensure that the child, the young person, understands what they're being asked to do. It's a test of motor ability. It's not a test of cognition. So we have different ways to be able to do that. And the demonstration videos also provide an accessibility option. So if you're unable to demonstrate the items, you can use the videos to support the administration. And scoring of the Movement ABC has been modified when compared to the previous edition. So whereas the previous edition used standard scores with a mean of 10 and a standard deviation of 3, the Movement ABC-3 test provides T-scores, which have a mean of 50 and a standard deviation of 10. And a really nice feature is both the test and the checklist scores can be interpreted in terms of a traffic light cut score system, with results falling in a red, amber, or green zones, which help with classifying those who may benefit from further assessment or intervention or monitoring. So a lot of users really like the red, amber, green scale as well, just to help with that interpretation. So as we've been talking, you're probably already going and doing your own comparisons. Maybe you're making notes, maybe you're making notes in your head. I'm going to try and make that a little easier for you here with this Venn diagram. So we're going to take a look at both tests side by side so we can really see how they are similar and how they are different. We know that both motor assessments, they are both motor assessments, and they both incorporate both gross motor and fine motor skills. They're both well known and respected, and they both have norms up to 25 years, 11 months. And both have digital options on Q Global. So where are the differences? I'm sure you're all asking that question. So the BOT-3 is a lot more comprehensive than the Movement ABC-3. It has a total of 63 items spread over those 8 subtests that Elizabeth talked about. as opposed to the 10 items across 3 domains, which we see in the movement ABC-3. Of course, there are pros and cons to this. Sometimes you need a very in-depth assessment, and sometimes you need a brief snapshot, and that's all that's required. And with so many more items, the BOT-3 takes longer to administer than the movement ABC-3. If all subtests are completed, the BOT-3 will take somewhere between 50 and 90 minutes, as opposed to 30 to 45 for the full movement ABC-3 test. So while, yes, you do get a lot more detail from the BOT-3, you will need to spend more time administering the test. And that's really worth considering when you think about not only the time you have available to conduct evaluations, but also your examinee's level of tolerance for testing. If you have young children, students on your caseload who perhaps have difficulties with attention or intellectual disabilities or significant receptive language issues, or maybe you need to use an interpreter, then perhaps the movement ABC-3 allows you to get your whole test done in a shorter space of time. And associated with that level of detail provided by each of those assessments, we could say that the BOT-3 describes motor functioning, whereas the main power of the movement ABC-3 lies in identifying motor impairments. And this is one reason why it's really is a popular tool for research as well. We could therefore use the results of the BOT-3 to give us good information for intervention planning, whereas the movement ABC-3 perhaps is more, it would need to be supplemented by the checklist and potentially other measures, perhaps tools like the BRI-VMI or clinical observations. We use some of those other measures to give us a more comprehensive picture. And while the normative ranges for both tests are very similar, the movement ABC-3 does have norms down to 3 years, while the BOT-3 starts at 4. And this is worth considering if you use another early developmental assessment, such as the Bailey-4, where the top end of that assessment is 42 months or 3.5 years. So if you're using something like the Bailey, you have a bit of overlap with the movement ABC-3, whereas you have a gap with the BOT-3. Another thing to note is that many of the younger children, particularly in clinical populations, might struggle with some of the BOT-3 tasks since they are the same tasks no matter whether you are age 4 or 25 years of age. With different tasks for each of the 3 age bands of the movement ABC, it might be a friendly option for children aged under perhaps about 6 years of age. And given that 3-year-olds only complete 7 out of those 10 tasks on the movement ABC, testing time is quite a bit quicker for those children as well. And as Elizabeth talked about, the BOT-3 has those 3 supplemental scores: skilled manual performance, planning and coordination, and the movement fundamental score, which we are very, very excited about. And they are going to give examiners a lot more useful information than ever before. And there's no equivalent to that on the movement ABC-3. Although it does have a checklist component, which the BOT-3 doesn't have. And I should also point out that the checklist is available as a standalone product as well. It has its own manual, it can be purchased separately, as well as being in the main movement ABC-3 kit. So it can be used as an adjunct to other assessments, including the BOT. It doesn't have to be used alongside the movement ABC, so it can be used alongside other assessments to give you that top-down view of how motor skills are impacting everyday activities. And I should also point out that if you're a digital assessment library user, if you're using DOLS or digital assessment library, you will already have access to the checklist, so you can try it out, see what you think. It's quite easy. And as well as those new supplemental scores, the BOT-3 is going to offer those growth scale values, which Elizabeth talked about, which are a great addition to track progress in those individuals who are making gains in their own time. But if you look at normative scores, perhaps they're not making gains on normative scores because they're not keeping pace with their typically developing peers. But the growth scale values really help you to document that they are making progress and change, and they're really good at supporting, helping support and provide that evidence. And again, there's no equivalent to this in the movement ABC-3, but the movement ABC-3 does have the non-motor factors components in both the test and the checklist. So if you're working with individuals who perhaps have social, emotional, and behavioural concerns, then these non-motor factors are definitely something you want to consider. And lastly, if we think about the norms for each test, we know that the BOT-3 data were collected in the United States, whereas norms for the movement ABC-3 are derived from data collected in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. And not forgetting that history of the test where the original norms were for the movement, the first edition, were actually collected in the US. And although often we look for local norms, do remember that especially in countries that have a similar demographic, the trajectory of motor development is pretty consistent across different countries. So the local data is not so vital, as we expect children from different countries to be relatively comparable. And certainly when we started data collection for the movement ABC-3, we wanted to make sure that the samples collected from Australia and New Zealand were going to be similar enough to the UK to make the collaboration feasible. And our analysis showed that they were. So I hope that gives you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the differences. I'm going to pass you back to Elizabeth now, who's going to, we're going to talk through some clinical applications.
Great, thank you, Shelley. Nate, like she said, let's start by illustrating how these two tests might be applicable in clinical practice, and these clinical scenarios are going to help us understand where the properties of each test might make them more or less suited to a particular clinical scenario. I've seen a ton of questions pop up similar to this in the Q&A, so let's work through these together, and hopefully some of those questions will be answered. We developed these case scenarios based on some of the common referral questions that we've experienced as OTs. So our first scenario here is a 9-year-old boy in 4th grade who has a diagnosis of ADHD and is on an IEP, but OT was asked to evaluate for potentially being added to his services. He is good at math and he tries his best, but has some difficulty organizing himself and his belongings. He also has some social difficulties maintaining friendships. He struggles to complete his work, and he also has some difficulty producing neat handwriting. Okay, so that's the case. Now let's think about what we would need from a motor assessment. We know that it's relatively common for people with ADHD to have motor difficulties, so we'll probably want to look at both gross and fine motor skills to get a holistic picture of this student's motor performance. And then thinking about the test demands and examining tolerance for testing that Shelley just talked about on the previous slide. This child is 9 years old, he is academically very able, so he would probably be able to manage the demands of the BOT-3 test. In addition, I'm thinking that the supplemental scores, in particular planning and coordination score that we get from the BOT-3, could also be very helpful here, since it seems like planning in general may be a potential area of challenge for this student. However, I also think it would be really useful to find out a little more about what's happening in his everyday life to get an idea of how much things like the non-motor factors that are associated with his ADHD diagnosis might be impacting his motor skills. So everybody just take a moment and think about what test or perhaps what combination of tests you might want to use in this scenario. Perhaps you have an idea. Hopefully, that's great. I think that a great combination of tools would be to administer the BOT-3 together with the movement ABC-3 checklist, which could be completed by his caregiver, possibly also his teacher. You'll find that these tools are extremely complementary and can help address a full spectrum of motor assessment needs that we detailed in this case scenario. On to you, Shelley, for case 2.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. So our second scenario is a much younger child, a 5-year-old girl with a diagnosis of Down syndrome and also conductive hearing loss. She has an IEP. She participates in occupational therapy, in physical therapy, and speech and language pathology. And she's under the care of a Down syndrome clinic at her local children's hospital, where she's reviewed about every 6 months. And during these reviews, she has regular assessments. So you know, she's used to participating in this sort of process. The main language that she speaks at home, or family speak rather, is Spanish. And although she has not yet developed verbal language, she is learning how to use an assistive device to communicate. Her parents' main concern at the time of her assessment is her communication skills. But we're looking at motor skills as part of the multidisciplinary assessment. So again, if we think back to that Venn diagram and the differences we discussed between the two tests, the factors we need to keep in mind are that she's young, she's under 6 years of age, she has some intellectual and cognitive delays associated with her diagnosis of Down syndrome, and she also has receptive language issues related to her hearing loss. Then overlaid on all of those factors, we know that her native language is Spanish. So that's another thing to consider, that since that may also complicate her ability to understand what we need her to do in a test. So if you want to have a little think for a moment, just have a think through what you think might be the best option in this scenario. I'm going to say, there it is on the screen, the movement ABC-3 test and checklist, I think, would be the best choice in this scenario. Because with these, we'll be able to get a reasonable snapshot of motor skills without needing a whole lot of detail and in a relatively short space of time. And the checklist will give us some really useful information from a parent perspective. And we know that the parent perspective is really important. We did I'll just mention a webinar we did a couple of days ago on interprofessional collaboration in early childhood. And one of the points of that webinar was talking about the caregiver and the parent perspective being really, really key in the assessment process. And without that perspective, we can really skew our view and what we're seeing. So it really is important to get that parent perspective, and that's what this has enabled us to do here. I'm going to pass you back to Elizabeth for the next one.
Great. Our third scenario involves a 13-year-old student who's undergoing a multidisciplinary assessment for suspected dysgraphia. This boy loves sports, he's really good at baseball, and he's doing well socially, has no concerns academically, but has always struggled with his handwriting. His teacher reports it's messy, difficult to read, and he experiences a lot of fatigue in his hand, even after short stints of writing. So in this case, a motor assessment is required as part of the diagnostic process, and clearly, I think we can all think in a situation like this, we're going to want to get a good look at his fine motor skills specifically. So we're automatically leaning toward the BOT-3 because we know the BOT-3 can give us some really good in-depth information across 4 different areas of fine motor performance. And since there don't seem to really be any gross motor concerns, I would say that the BOT-3 fine motor kit is probably the best fit. Note that the BOT-3 is available for purchase in complete, gross motor, and fine motor kits. And if you purchase the fine motor kit, you'll get all 4 of those fine motor subtests, which is really all I think you'd probably need in this case. The fine motor subtests include, just to repeat for those who maybe aren't as familiar, fine motor precision, fine motor integration, manual dexterity, and upper limb coordination. Given this 13-year-old, his baseball skills, I bet he'd probably do really great on that last subtest, upper limb coordination. But as I'm thinking through this case, I'm also thinking that the new skilled manual performance score, which combines the other 3 fine motor subtests, would be a really great score to use as contributing information for this dysgraphia assessment. Shelley, we've got one more case scenario. On to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Elizabeth. So our final scenario is a 18-year-old student, an older student. She's autistic and has an intellectual disability. She's in a final year of high school and will be transitioning into an inclusive higher education program. So this assessment will form part of the documentation around that transition. She loves cooking, she loves anything to do with animals, and she would love to find a job that allows her to work with animals. She's experienced high levels of anxiety throughout her life and tends to shy away from activities where she feels demands are being placed upon her that she might not be able to meet. She's had lots of different assessments over the years, and it can be a challenge to motivate her to participate and try her best. So let's weigh up the different factors that are going to contribute to our decision-making about which tool to use for our assessment. Knowing her reluctance to participate and the presence of an intellectual impairment, I'm thinking we would like a quick assessment that will provide a broad overview of motor skills. It feels like the BOT-3 might be a little too long and challenging for her, and we really don't need that depth of information. We're unlikely to be formulating a specific motor intervention plan. So, as you're probably all wondering, in this case, I think our best bet is to use the movement ABC-3. If we could get both the test and the checklist completed, that obviously would be ideal. But if our performance-based test session isn't successful, we can at least use the checklist to give us some information to go on. So, I hope that gives you some sort of examples of different scenarios that you might find useful for applying both the BOT-3 and the movement ABC-3. I'm going to pass you back to Elizabeth to sort of close us out on the next slide before we go to the Q&A. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. So just wrapping up here, first of all, thanks for thinking through these clinical scenarios with us. Of course, these are just a few clinical examples, just a small snapshot of what you probably see day to day, which is a diverse range of children and young adults with varying needs and abilities. We hope this started to sort of just jog your imagination for different ways that you can use these tests. In your clinical practice, there will likely be some cases where the BOT-3 will be the best tool, and others where the movement ABC-3 is a more suitable choice, or maybe you'll see opportunity for a combination of the tests. You can think of these tests as the motor assessment version of the Wonder Twins, who are on this picture here on this slide. I'm not sure how many of you know of the Wonder Twins. They're DC Comics characters who each have special powers. One can turn any animal into any animal. The other can become water in any state. But their powers are activated when they touch fists, and they always work together, with each one harnessing their unique skills to achieve a common goal. So, bear with me here, using this analogy similar to the Wonder Twins, the ideal situation is that you'll have access to both motor assessments, and then you'll be equipped for whatever comes your way. Particularly if you work in a clinic or school that has a lot of clinicians and you need multiple copies of assessments, we would encourage you to consider adding a mix of both of these great assessments into your toolbox. So you'll find more information about the BOT-3 and the movement ABC-3 on our website, where we have some commonly asked questions, resources such as sample reports, and there's also a place where you can register for a complimentary introductory training to the tests. I saw several questions in the Q&A about that, so look there on our website to see that complimentary introductory training. You can also feel free to reach out to your local assessment consultant, and we provided the link at the chat at the beginning of our talk today, and they can help you find the information you need. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have that webinar that's focused just on the BOT-3 that's coming up at the end of May, and you can register for that under the webinars tab on the BOT-3 product page. So now I'm going to invite Shelley to come on video along with me, and we'll open up the rest of our time to answering some questions. Great. So Shelley, I have a couple questions that I highlighted in the Q&A that I'd love to be able to address quickly. We have a little bit of time. So I'm going to start with questions about removing sex-based norms from the BOT-3. We do provide detail of our analysis in the manual. So if you're looking for the actual statistical analysis, please dive into that manual, get crazy with the psychometrics and the statistics, and it's all there. But basically, we made this decision based on an in-depth analysis looking at sex-based differences across all 1,300 plus of our normative sample. We looked across all ages, and we just found that the sex-based differences were really negligible, and they didn't warrant providing different scores. In often cases, in almost every case of the combined subtest score, we weren't seeing any differences, and so it didn't make sense to provide two tables with exactly the same sets of scores in our norms tests. That's why we moved it to the combined norms. The other thing I wanted to touch base on was a little bit more about the BOT-3 Q Global offerings. We had a question about the on-screen assessment version. I did mention that you don't need your record form, you don't need the admin easel, just the item picture book. But I forgot to mention when I was talking about that you still use the response booklet that we traditionally use for the first three subtests of the BOT-3. So to do the pencil and paper test, you're still using a response booklet that's included in the digital kit. And then if you're thinking about, okay, how does that work when it's time to score the test? You'll go through the whole administration, you'll administer all of those items. You will not score them in real time, just like you would in the regular BOT-3 traditional pencil and paper administration. You'd hold on scoring those, submit the test, and then you go back into Q Global, you score the test and you record your scores there, and then you generate your report. Similar question about the Q Global is for folks who don't provide the whole BOT-3 test. One of the awesome things about the bot is that it's super flexible to what your needs are. You can get a ton of scores across so many different motor areas, or you can get a more targeted set of scores just in the areas that you're looking for. For instance, this person who asked the question only does the fine motor subtests. You can still create a Q Global report, score it, and create a Q Global report no matter what iteration of the test you use or what combination of subtests you use. You'll still get the scores, you'll still get a digital report. Shelley, did you have anything you wanted to cover?
I'm gonna pick up a couple. There's a few that have asked a question about with the movement ABC, can you do just the manual dexterity section, for example? Yes, you can, but it is more robust to do the overall assessment. So we would recommend doing the overall assessment with the movement ABC, just because there are so few items at each of those age ranges. So, but again, you can supplement it with a checklist, which is going to look at those same domains and give you more information as well. So, and that isn't performance based. It is a caregiver or a self-report if you're an older individual. The other one I was going to pick up on. There's the three subjects. Sorry, I'm just looking at them right now. So I just lost it now. Do you use? Sorry, go on. I've just found it. Do you use a separate form for each age band of the movement ABC? Yes, you do use a separate form for each age band. So there are different forms for each of those. So 3 different forms, 1 for each age band, because the tasks are different on each form. And then another one, and then I'll pass it back to you, Elizabeth. This is something else. One is, will the movement ABC checklist be on Q Global? Yes, it is on Q Global. And what's included in the checklist? So the checklist. It's a 40-item checklist, which are in those same domains as the full assessment, but they're tasks that are related to activities of daily living. So for a fine motor task, you might have tasks such as fastening buttons, turning the pages of a book. For ball tasks, it might be things like being able to reach something without knocking something over, or participating in ball games within school, or for the balance task, it might be things like balancing to put your socks on and to get dressed, or maintaining balance when you're walking on an uneven surface, for example. So they're the sort of things that you're going to find within the checklist. I'll pass you back to. Have you got another one, Elizabeth? While I just have a look at some others.
Yeah, I do. I have a question that relates to both tests, and I think it's an awesome question because it speaks to the need for renorming tests over time. The question was, have you adapted the test to changes, less engagement in fine and gross motor activities and play during free time, and much more time spent in front of the screen in activities typically done by young people? And I love this question because that's why we renorm tests. It's really important that we renorm tests every so often because we want the norms to represent sort of the cultural and societal norms of gross and fine motor development at that time. So both of these tests have been renormed with representative samples from the countries that they were normed in. And that's why it's really important to use the new norms so that you're comparing your examinee to what is considered the culturally significant and appropriate norms of the time and not from 20 years ago. So thank you for that question. Shelley, do you have another one?
I do. So somebody's asked about movement ABC. Do you have a picture of the movement ABC-3 balance beam? Is there just one beam now? I'm hoping it's much better. Yes, that's one thing we did improve. So it is one, it folds out now. And actually, there is, I know on the UK site, and I can't remember if this is up on the US site yet or not. I think it might just be on the UK site. There is an unboxing video which actually shows the items on there, sort of, so you'd be able to get a feel for some of those items and some of those changes. And then where can sample reports be found on the BOT-3 and the movement ABC. We will be putting sample reports up there when they're available. I think they're up there. I'm trying to remember now off the top of my head without going in to check. I think they might be already up there for the movement ABC, but they're not, because we haven't published the BOT-3 yet. They're not up there yet, but we will have sample reports up there in due course. And then another one just about the movement ABC checklist. Is it available as a standalone? Yes, it is. And is there a PDF version of the checklist in Q Global? Now, no, there isn't a PDF version in Q Global. There's a PDF version of the manual available within Q Global, but the checklist is actually administered within the Q Global platform. So it's not as a PDF in there. Are there any others that you've found, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I've got two. One's a short one. There's a question about the bot brief kit, and I'm just going to use this as a teaser to say if you log on and register for our BOT-3 specific webinar at the end of the month, we'll definitely be talking more about the bot brief kit. So the bot brief is brand new also, great updates, a couple more scores that I think you'll find really useful. So log into that webinar and we'll give some more information there. Another question that we've received is just about how long do we recommend until you switch over to using these new versions of the tests. So this just kind of piggybacks on my previous answer about the importance of using new norms. So typically we recommend transitioning to the new test within about a year. Pearson will stop sales of the old kit immediately after we publish the new test, like Movement ABC-3, BOT-3 will stop sales of the BOT-2 when we publish in June. And then we'll continue to support the old versions with selling record forms for some time. But again, we're thinking about within the year, it's a good idea to switch over.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. There's a couple of people asking if we can screen share some of the items and things. We can't because this is public domain content, so we can't actually share some of the content. But if you have got follow-up questions, then I do recommend you fill in the survey at the end, and one of our sales representatives will be able to follow up with you and give you more information on that. And then there was another one. Where was it now? I've just lost it. Prices, a couple of questions about prices there on our website. There is pre-publication pricing available for the BOT-3 still. It's no longer available for the Movement ABC-3 because that's now published, but until the BOT-3 publishes, there's a pre-publication discount, which is 10% pre-publication discount, which will be valid through to publication, basically. And then mindful of time, we've got a couple of minutes left. Where else? There's about 50 something questions still outstanding, folks. So we're not going to get through them all. I would, if we haven't got to your question, would encourage you to take a copy of it, put it in the survey at the end, and we'll get somebody to follow up with you on that question. So there are a lot here, which is great to see.
You know, Shelley, I think that's a good place for us to stop. I think if we haven't answered your question, we want to. So please submit it in the follow-up survey and someone will reach out to you with an answer to your question. We hope that today you were maybe introduced to a new test, the Movement ABC-3, maybe just got a better feel for the different ways that you can use these tests either separately or together. And we just thank you for your time. We know you guys are busy out there. So thanks for joining us for an hour to go over the BOT-3 and the Movement ABC, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.